No Days Groutless is designed not only to be the adhesive, but also to act as a visual grout. So, for instance, this piece here has not been grouted. The adhesive is placed down on the substrate, the pieces are placed on top, and then you heat it. The adhesive disappears from between the pieces and rises up to the surface around the pieces of glass. No Days Groutless can be used on larger pieces as well as smaller pieces, and this webinar is going to focus on making jewelry pieces with the No Days Groutless. For those of you that are unfamiliar with No Days Groutless Mosaic Adhesive, it comes in black, clear, and pewter. It's a dry to the touch, heat activated adhesive that comes in square foot rolls. It's also available in 12-inch by 4 feet lengths and in bulk rolls. It's packaged with this silicone release liner. One side is shiny, you can see. The other side is a little bit matte. Okay, so don't throw this out. I'm going to show you why you may want to keep this. The board that I'm working with here, it's a homosoap board which is heat proof. It's also covered with the silicone release liner. The Groutless Mosaic Adhesive is going to stick to everything except for silicone. The first thing I want to show you is the most basic way of working with No Days Groutless. You take your roll, you cut it to fit your bezel pendant, and then you start stacking pieces on top. I want to line it up with my bezel. And typically, I'll take my fingernail and just make a mark along the edges of the bezel container that show me where I need to cut it. If that's not working with you, you can certainly use a Sharpie or a pen to give yourself some guidelines for cutting. Then you're going to go ahead and cut that sheet of Groutless out. Take the piece that you just cut and fit it into the bezel. If it's snug anywhere, just go ahead and push it down. If you need to, you can cut it to fit. Any little bits that you have left over, you should save in a container because you can reuse all of those little tiny bits. If you're having a hard time getting the Groutless to sit flat in your bezel, you can preheat it to tack it down. If you're using a heat gun, you likely will want to heat from below the piece instead of from above. If you're heating from above, the Groutless has a tendency to fly away. To heat it from below, don't hold it with your hands, hold it with the tweezers. Go ahead and turn your heat gun on. If you heat from below with the heat gun, then the adhesive won't fly away. Metal is a conductor, and you'll see as it starts to transfer the heat through and melt the No Days Groutless. The Groutless may start to pull back on itself, but this can be fixed easily. Okay, so we have a couple of bald spots here, and I'm just going to fill them in with little strips of the Groutless adhesive. The only reason you would need to melt the Groutless in advance is if you're using scrappy pieces and you want them to fill in, or if you're using pieces that won't sit flat and you're being frustrated by that. Now the bezel that I'm working with has a slight incline right here. The reason for that is because the loop is sitting perpendicular to the bezel itself. To fix that so my adhesive doesn't flow while I'm heating, I generally stick a piece of glass underneath that, and then it will sit flush. Now that I have my bezel prepped, it's time to put in my pieces. I've got a selection of scrap stained glass here and here. I've got my stained glass tools right here, my glass cutting tools. I can go ahead and cut the pieces and fit them in. Some of these I have pre-cut. So I'm going to go ahead and just start placing my pieces down in the bezel here. If you pre-cut a whole bunch of pieces, then you can go ahead and lay them in there, and then as you're working, you can simply use your mosaic nippers to cut pieces exactly to the right size so that they fit just so. If you want to get a bunch of straight cuts, You can use your glass cutter, go right down the middle there, and then the running pliers to break this. And then I've got two little pieces here, two nice and skinny straight pieces. Figure out where those go. And notice how I'm building rather close together with these pieces. If you want the adhesive to completely fill in and rise to the surface, then you're going to want to build really close together and not have much of a gap. Most of that adhesive is going to get pressed out as the glass heats, and it's going to rise up around the pieces and look like the visual grout. However, some of it will stay underneath. And these pendants here show you an example of that, where you can see through the transparent glass to the pattern of the bezel pendants underneath. With this initial pendant, I'm going to show you how to heat using the heat gun. I've got a few different heating methods I'm going to show you with more pendants. So when using the orange No Days heat gun, you want to make sure that you heat on high, which is the button marked 2. This comes with a little protective rubber cover on it, and some people don't like that rubber cover, so that can be pulled off. But if you look closely, the 1 and the 2, the 1 is a low setting that's used for drying paints and other applications. The 2 is going to be for activating the adhesive. So we want to use it on setting 2. We don't want to start really close because the force of the hot air is going to blow our pieces all over the place. We want to make sure that our work surface is clear from other heat set adhesive products, right? So that we don't melt those too. So as I'm heating, I don't want to heat that way, I want to heat that way. So I like to hold the heat gun like this. This feels really wrong to me, ergonomically wrong. It hurts my wrist. I don't like that. So I hit the on button and then I hold it like this or like this. It's okay to hold around the plastic. Don't touch the metal. The metal will get very hot, okay? We're going to start heating from up high and slowly come down closer. While I'm heating, I generally look for the glass pieces to start to shimmy, and if they're shimmying, then I know that I need to stop or back off as I'm heating. Notice that as I'm heating, I'm pressing down on the glass pieces. That's to test to see whether or not the adhesive under the glass has melted. If I can slide the pieces around easily, then the heat has transferred through the glass to melt the adhesive underneath, and they'll be fully bonded when the pieces cool down. So after you're done heating, if you've given it a really good heat, you're going to have a couple of minutes to move things into place. And that's because glass is an insulator. It's going to hold on to its heat. Metal's a conductor, so the adhesive will start melting where it's touching the metal first, but you need to continue heating until that glass gets nice and hot. The glass and the metal need to reach 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That is too hot to touch. But basically, if you can slide those pieces around as you're pushing on them, then you know that they have reached that too hot to touch temperature. If the pieces start to set up and you're not finished, go ahead and hit it with the heat gun again, reheat that section, and then you can move the pieces back into place. That is part of the magic of the No Days Groutless, is that you can continually reheat it and set it. So say a couple months go by and I'm really tired of this design, or say 30 seconds go by and I realize that, wow, that color combination was terrible and I don't want to waste that bezel pendant. I can reheat this, knock out and pull out all of that all of those glass pieces and completely reuse this pendant. Okay, so no waste ever. I'm going to go ahead and heat this green piece and just pull it out for you. I don't think it looks bad there, but I'm going to show you what happens if you do decide that it looks bad and you need to fix it. Okay, so I just heated that piece up, I pulled it out, and I put it over here on the silicone release liner. The adhesive isn't going to stick to that release liner unless it's hot. Once it cools down, it's going to peel right off that release liner. So that means if I put my glass down there, adhesive side down, that as soon as that cools down, I can peel it off. It'll still have a little adhesive on the underside, so I don't have to worry about that adhesive getting stuck to anything else. If I want to clean it off that glass, then I want to make sure that I'm wiping that adhesive off while it's wet. Okay, so it's still kind of hot. So let's go in here, and I was noticing that there are a few little gaps here where the adhesive was pulling back, but I wanted to be able to not see the silver from the bezel underneath. What I need to do there is take a little bit of the Groutless Mosaic Adhesive and cut off just a tiny sliver. If the bezel pendant is still really nice and warm, you can take this little strip of adhesive and touch it down into the places where you want it to go. It's kind of like soldering. So you can just feed your adhesive strip right in there where you need it to go. See, I've got it right there. I'm going to push it into that little gap. And I'm also seeing a spot up here in the middle where I think I could use a little bit more adhesive. So I'm just going to tear a little bit of this off. And I'm going to go ahead and just poke it in this little gap here. And that's going to help build the adhesive up in that spot. The Groutless adhesive was made to rise up around your pieces, but that's going to be fully dependent on the size and the number of pieces and the spacing between the pieces. The further they are apart, the less the adhesive is going to be able to fill that empty space. The closer they are together, the more it's going to be able to feed that empty space. I have a couple of pieces that I placed in there, a couple of pieces of the Groutless to kind of fill in some of those gaps where I could see the silver of the bezel, and I didn't want to see the silver of the bezel. To mount those strips of adhesive that I placed in the pendant, I need to go ahead and heat it up again. And anytime I add another design element like that green piece of glass, I need to heat it up again so it gets nice and hot. There we go, and I notice I have a little sliver of an area there where I think that I should use a little sliver of something bright. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill that in. So tiniest sliver that I've got there. So I'm going to nip off a tiny sliver here, stick it in there, and give that a heat now too. So when I place that in there, it might sink into the adhesive and look like it's going to stay, but remember, both surfaces need to be 160 degrees. So that glass that I put in there is cold. It might tack initially and then pop off eventually. So make sure you go ahead and heat it right now to get a full bond. So that's the most basic, simple, straightforward way to use the No Days Groutless. We created a bezel pendant using scrap stained glass. You can use smalty, you can use beads, you can use mixed media, and now I'm going to show you that you don't have to limit yourself to just one layer. You can stack on top of that. So I have these old earrings that I ripped apart to get these cute little teardrop thingies. I could use some of the scraps from the No Days pewter Groutless. However, I'm going to switch to the No Days clear Groutless right now. So when working with this clear, I just need a little tiny bit. I'm going to put it next to the little teardrop and make a little mark. It shows me about the height that I need. And both of those are about the same shape. So I'm just going to cut a little strip. Now it's important to note the back of these teardrops have a flat surface, so I won't need as much adhesive as if there was a textured or concave surface on the back side. So I'm just going to cut a couple little strips of that. I know that I want to put my pieces right there, so I'm just going to go ahead and flip those over. I'm going to put my adhesive down. Now you could certainly go ahead and use a different kind of adhesive. However, with the No Days, it sets up instantly. So as soon as these pieces cool down, they are finished. There's no need to clean up if you get the right amount of adhesive on there. There's no need to wait an extended period for this to cure. I don't want to heat too close again. Little pieces. You only need to heat long enough to get the adhesive underneath the teardrops to melt. The reason I'm using the clear is that if there's a little bit too much adhesive, then I don't need to worry about cleanup because it won't run all over the place and you won't see it anyway. Okay, so that didn't take too long. And I still have a moment to fuss with the positioning. So I don't need to stop there. If I wanted, if I had some more beads, I could go ahead and place a couple little accents here and there. But I think I'm going to call this one good for now.